Hello and welcome to another edition of the Knicks Film School Pregame Show. My name is Andrew Claudio, a.k.a. GMAC, and it's time to preview another Knicks matchup, this time on Thursday night, back at home at MSG before going right back on the road for some reason. Thank you, Adam Silver, against the Sacramento Kings, a team that comes in with the exact same record as the Knicks, 44-31, a team that has also been banged up and ravaged by injuries lately. From what I can tell, season-ending injuries. I guess we'll see what happens with Malik Monk. Malik Monk and Kevin Huerter. No disrespect, but they're not the same level as OG Anunoby and Julius Randle, but a team that can understand being shorthanded going into this matchup. And a team that's coming in in the midst of a heated playoff race where a bunch of teams are clumped up together. The Knicks are obviously coming in losers of 3 straight and are doing everything until the cavalry comes back home. If the cavalry comes back home to try and stay above water in this Eastern Conference playoff race. And of course, it's always just annoying to lose to the Miami Heat. But joining me to talk about this matchup on Thursday night from the Deuce and Mo podcast. You can also find their show on YouTube. Mr. Deuce Mason. Deuce, thank you so much for joining me.
Dude, appreciate it, man. Time out, though. Talk about the schedule. You want to talk about the schedule? The Kings play in New York on Thursday, Boston the next night. What are they doing?
Yeah,
how are they giving the Kings a back-to-back against the Knicks in Boston?
Okay, in fairness, I was more specifically talking about travel. Opponents are different. Like playing New York, Boston, you are catching the Knicks at the right time and how shorthanded they are. Boston, who knows what they're still playing for? I know they haven't clinched yet, and they are going up to Boston is always a difficult thing to do. But you're at least the Kings are at least staying in the Eastern time zone.
Yeah. It's just
the Knicks are going from Florida on Tuesday, back to New York on Thursday, then to Chicago the next night, then to Milwaukee on Sunday, back to Chicago on Tuesday, then back to New York, then to Boston, and then they play Brooklyn. So they're gonna get their flyer miles in over the next week or so. We're in a fight to the finish here in New York, and I can tell that the Kings, in a very, very weird Western Conference, like the Knicks are currently tied for the 4th seed at the moment. The Kings, with the exact same record, are in the 7th spot at the moment, potentially would be in the play-in. So I ask you, from the outside looking in, what's going on in Sacramento? How are the fan base? How are the players? How are the vibes going on over there?
Well, it's felt completely different this year, right? I mean, you think about last year, there were no expectations going into the season, right? This Kings team had the longest playoff drought in NBA history. Mm-hmm. So any pushing for 500 in Sacramento was going to be like a celebration. And so everybody was vibing. The players were like, wow, we're getting more love than ever because we're winning. They played a fun style of basketball, number 1 in offensive rating last year. It was the first year where we had this laser beam get shot up in the sky after win. Mm-hmm. So it was a vibe. Everything was a vibe. And I told people last year, hey, the reality is it's not going to feel like this again, right? Because it's the come up. There's nothing like the come up in sports. There's nothing like the come up when you've been a losing team. The Kings have been in Sacramento 39 years. They just clinched their 10th winning season. That's insane, right?
Yeah.
So this year expectations are higher, and it was a clunky start at times. It's been inconsistent. They've had some really bad losses. You're talking about the Knicks being shorthanded. I'm like, for Sacramento, it doesn't matter. They've lost to teams they shouldn't have. Washington. They lost to Detroit at home. They lost to Charlotte at home. They lost at Portland, who was shorthanded. They've had so many disappointing losses where you look at those and go, if they take care of business in those games, we're not having the play-in conversation. We're having a conversation about this team pushing for home court advantage. So I think in some ways they faced a lot more adversity this year, not only with some of these losses that they've had, but some of the injuries that they did not have to deal with last year. They were relatively healthy, except with Sabonis, who was playing with the hand injury.
I think the fascinating thing from my perspective, just looking at what the Kings have gone through this year and where they end up in the standings. And they won 47 games last year. They may very well likely win 47 games again this year. But you're right, the context being different, where last year it's an unexpected or maybe expected season, but a season that you got to enjoy as the 3 seed, with the West being what it was, where you the Lakers, kind of figuring themselves out until they finally traded Russ. You had the Suns making that midseason trade, but never really putting that team together because KD wasn't healthy. The Warriors couldn't get out of their own way, although who knows with the Warriors? They're also 10 games over 500 as the 10th seed right now in the West. The version of the West that existed last year, now putting the Kings in this version of the West, it seems like they made a very lateral. Like progression isn't linear, but it, like, if you could put it to how the vibes around the fans are, if they end up with like the exact same record and it's very clear like this team didn't take a step back, will they still be disappointed if this is a team that ends up in the play-in?
I mean, if it's a team that ends up, what's the result of the play-in? That's the question. I think if we're having this conversation in a few weeks and the Kings end up in the play-in and they get bounced and they don't make the playoffs, I think it's going to be an extreme disappointment. I think making the playoffs, this team getting more experience as a playoff team matters. To me, it's not about them winning a playoff series this year. They need the reps. Last year was the first time for a lot of those guys to play playoff basketball, and they pushed the Warriors to the limits, had their chances to win that series, and they lost in 7 games. So this year, they changed their style of play a little bit. They wanted to not be so predictable. So come playoff time, they can lock in, and if the dribble handoffs are being taken away, they can adjust, right? They're not just a one-trick pony where they're just trying to outscore you. Now they're trying to lean into, hey, we can function with different types of sets. We don't have to win in just one way, and we have to be better defensively. So if they got to the play-in, and that's what sucks about the play-in this year, it's like, pick your poison, right? Great. You get a play-in, and I understand these teams are flawed too, but I don't want to see Kevin Durant and Devin Booker in a play-in game. I don't want to see Steph Curry in a win or go home game. I saw that last year when he dropped 50 at Golden One Center in Sacramento. Do you really want to see LeBron and AD? It's just, there's not really a good situation. And that's why getting into the top 6 would be fantastic. The Kings are just a game out of the 5th spot as it stands right now. But yeah, I mean, I think it'd be an extreme disappointment if they got bounce out in the play-in, for sure. I think a playoff series is kind of what people want to see. So
it's gravy after that. They get out of the it's a playoff series loss, which like you said, to the amount of winning that the Kings may or may not have been doing over the last couple decades, that actually is like, okay, back-to-back playoff bursts. I'll take it. Is that what I'm reading? That's the most disappointing version of a season.
I can't speak for every Kings fan.
Right,
but for me, I'm realistic about the West has never been better, and it's going to get even harder next year. This Kings team is flawed. It was flawed going into the season, and they didn't do anything at the deadline. They did nothing at the deadline, right? They cash considerations move. They got Robin Lopez and waived him. Besides that, nothing. Over the offseason, they made some moves, and none of them really panned out. Now, the story's not written yet. It's not over. We'll see what it looks like at the end of it. But I think as this team gets more experience, you want to see them take some steps. Like, does this 7-game series look like if they get a 7-game series? Are they getting smacked around? I mean, if they get beat and swept and they weren't in it, like, that's going to be disappointing. But if it's competitive, they have a chance to win. And hell, I mean, I think there's a chance they could win a first-round series if they're locked in. So that's... I'm sure there are some fans like, oh, you didn't advance in the first round. Oh, this sucks. It's like, no, it's up to the front office this offseason to make some moves to add to this core of Fox and Sabonis for Keegan to take a jump in year 3 and then see what it looks like.
So the idea of progress is, I guess it's a Rorschach test, like you can't just look at it by seeding, because they go from 3 to 7, but they say they win 48 games this year. That's technically more than last year, but the West got better, as we've said. The Knicks, they may very well end up as the 5 seed again. And last year, it looked like they, outkicked their coverage to an extent that people weren't putting Jalen Brunson in MVP conversations. Whether he should be in MVP conversations now or not is fascinating, but I'm not going to say he's the MVP of the league. He's just like the MVP of our hearts here in New York. But I think I'm starting to come around to, if they're a 5 seed again, that's not a step back. And I think when you go to the Kings net rating and how they actually have, I think, only a 1 point different in net rating. So their offense is a step below. They're not the number one offense anymore, but they're only 2 points per 100 possessions worse. And their defense, they're 7 spots higher. So
right,
you watching them most of this year in the league, just being better offensively. Like, do you notice any play style differences where okay, they've conceded a bit offensively, but they're absolutely better defensively, and that's why it's kind of grading out to the exact same place they were last year?
I think the biggest thing lately, and really since March 1st, has been the date. Keon Ellis got a chance to play, and I know Knicks fans probably think Keon Ellis is a joke because Brunson got him with the point, and he
that one play, yes.
Yeah.
We were watching that. We were watching on playback that night just to jump in. Yeah. I came away very impressed with the kid. I was like, oh, this is a pretty good young defender,
I understand looking at the whole season and go, oh, this is where they are. I'm big on like trends. Mm-hmm. Since the All-Star break, I had this written down from last night. Since March, they're 7th in defensive rating. They're 10th in offense. They're 8th in net rating. Since the All-Star break, 12th in defense, 10th in offense, 12th in net rating. The defense is dramatically better. And I'm not saying it's like, oh my God, lockdown, but for Sacramento, who's been near the bottom every single year in defensive rating for years and years and years, this is a big jump. And part of it is De'Aaron Fox has taken a huge step defensively. And now he's got help. Keon Ellis, who was on a 2-way contract last year, undrafted, he gets it converted after the deadline. So there's one move that the front office made at the deadline. They gave him a guaranteed deal. He got a start when Fox was out in Minnesota. Played awesome. Doesn't play the next game against Chicago. They lose. Then he ends up back in the rotation. Then Kevin Huerter goes down. Keon Ellis just making an impact every time he gets in there. Ellis and Fox combined out there, it's nasty because these guys are after it. They're handsy. Fox is averaging 4 deflections a game since the All-Star break, close to that, I believe. And Keon Ellis has been a monster, like 3 deflections a game. Sabonis is up there too. The perimeter defense is a lot better than it was. And so, I think Fox kind of thrives off that too. So Fox doesn't have to take the task of guarding the best guy now. Like, oh, Ellis can do that. And Fox can do his thing. Keegan Murray's a plus defender too. It looks pretty good out there. And then off the bench, all right, Fox is out. You bring Davion Mitchell in, who has the ability to play some physical on-ball defense, the thing that limits him at times, the size. Brunson got him in that game too, because Brunson's a stud. But their defense is so much better. It's insane. And so I think that's the biggest thing I think that I'm excited about with this team going forward. The injury to Monk and Huerter hurts them in some ways, but this defense has definitely taken a big time step. And I think Mike Brown loves it because he's like, we said this last night, we're not going to win playoff games by scoring 125 a night. We have to win like we did last night. They scored 109 points, but they held their opponent under 100 points last night, the Clippers, which was great. They were playing without Kawhi Leonard. And the other thing about that, they've held an opponent under 110 times this year. Not a crazy number, right? But 6 times since March 12th. So they're taking steps here as a group, which is really encouraging to see.
Well, one of those games that they held an opponent under 100 points was the Knicks game, the last time these two teams played. And look, OG Anunoby was playing with one arm. He will most likely not be playing. We're recording this at 2:00 on Wednesday. The injury reports have not been submitted yet. I'm just going to take a wild guess that the New York Knicks are going to submit that OG Anunoby and Julius Randle are out and that Mitchell Robinson is questionable for Thursday's game. That's just kind of been the trend over the last week or so. I do think that the Knicks going small creates an interesting matchup for the Kings because look, they went for 2 months after the first Anunoby Randle injury happened, and they had Precious Achiuwa playing the 4, and Tibbs was just like, I'm going to win the possession battle. Then Anunoby came back and he I thought we were headed for Josh Hart to the bench and Anunoby at the 4 and Anunoby at the 3 and Achiuwa at the 4. And he went just positionless and was like, all right, I'm just going to have OG play the 4 and like we'll switch 1 through 4. And when OG went out again, I was expecting we're going back to possession wars. We're just going to have Achua come back in, and he went to Deuce McBride at the 2. And Deuce has just been his shooting. You mentioned a guy on a 2-way contract just kind of making a name for himself. This is a second round pick that, got put into the rotation last year at one point, but while it was an uptick in defense, the offense just seemed to be, you get what you get. Like anything you get is bonus. And now, like, we're down the stretch of this game against Miami last night, and I'm like excited when they find him open for a shot, because I want Deuce taking the most important shots down the stretch. And, going into this game where they're kind of similar, the Knicks, like, very light beer version of Sabonis is Hartenstein. Yeah. And, Brunson and Fox, they both bring different things from an elite level. And maybe Ellis to Deuce is almost a good comp. So with the Knicks going small going into this matchup, and potentially this being a defensive battle, how do you like the Kings' chances going into this game on Thursday?
I'm fascinated by it. I thought that last game was a lot of fun. And you bring up Deuce McBride. In that game in Sacramento, he played terrible. And then since then, he has been on one, which is just great to see for his development for the Knicks. It's been really cool to see. The Kings have a different look the last couple of games, right? Malik Monk is out. And I'm like, okay, what's going to happen? But the next game, Trey Lyles comes back, and so does Sasha Vezenkov. The ball's been popping. The ball's been popping. The ball movement has been the best it's been in a long time. And I think this year specifically, the Kings relied a lot on Fox, Monk, Sabonis, where I think some guys were doing the stand around, and they weren't getting everybody involved. And it seems like since Monk's injury, that the ball's moving better. And Trey Lyles and Sasha are two bigs who could space the floor, hit threes. They're pretty tough, good rebounders, smart players, make the right play. They're not always looking to score. They're trying to make the right play. So now the Kings, who for a stretch, because those guys are out, were playing 4 guards at times, they've been playing bigger. Like last night, in the last couple of games, we're seeing Keegan Murray playing lineups where he's playing the 2. And they're going out there with, Harrison Barnes, Trey Lyles, Alex Len sometimes too. And it's working. Like the defensive communication's been good, and the offense has enough spacing. So I'm eager to see what it looks like against a really talented, tough, physical team. The Clippers, they've been a mess since the All-Star break. They're near the bottom of the NBA in defensive rating. The game before that, the Kings played a Jazz team that was starting with 3-4 rookies. So it's kind of hard to gauge at this point. So I think it's going to be a great test. I think the Kings will play better. But I think the last matchup was so fascinating to me going into it is like, how are the Kings going to handle the physicality? I felt like they did a good job with it. And that's kind of been the rap on them. When they get punched, can they punch back? And I felt like their offense wasn't there in that Knicks game. When you shoot 35%, the Knicks defense was great. OG with his one arm still having an impact defensively out there. And they were in the game, except for late game execution. I am eager to see what it looks like coming up on that game Thursday.
It's so interesting, the takeaways that we take from games like this, because like you say, the Kings offense wasn't there, and you took away that it was good that they were able to match the Knicks punch for punch. Yeah. Right. And my specific takeaway was that this is an elite offense that the Knicks just played, and they're shorthanded. Yeah. And that fourth quarter, like the last 4 minutes, the Knicks just got to turn the water off.
It was nasty.
And like Sabonis just having nowhere to go because Hartenstein is stopping him without fouling him. And then here comes Anunoby in help. Here comes Josh Hart in help. He's trying to find someone, but the Knicks have every passing lane blocked. And it's like, oh, so that I think was the most optimistic I've been about the Knicks this season, outside of this January stretch where they were 12-2 after the Anunoby trade. But it seemed like, okay, the offense may never come back to what it was in January if Randall doesn't come back. But if you have this gear to go to defensively, it's something I can be excited for in the playoffs. And I don't know if you know this, Adrian Anunoby has not played since that game, so I have no idea if we're ever going to see it again.
Just to be clear.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was coming from the Sacramento perspective for a second.
Yeah.
The Knicks were fantastic in that game. Like it was, and the Kings offense hasn't been as good this year. The shooting hasn't been as good. Kevin Huerter was a 40% 3-point shooter, hit over 200 threes last year. Keegan Murray, the same. Those guys have dipped a little bit, right? Well, it's Huerter big time. And Keegan's 3-point shooting, not where it was last year. But yeah, you have to give the Knicks credit for what they did. They took Sacramento out of their game. Sacramento, when they're at their best, they're pushing the pace. They're dictating the tempo. And I felt like at times, especially late, they try to slow it down. And it's like they have to keep playing with pace. Now, part of that too is the Knicks' ability to switch. They play tough. They're rebounding. It's just tremendous. So especially like Josh Hart is just, is this guy for real? Like he's always been a good rebounder, offensive rebounder. He's so fun to watch. So it's going to be a good test. I'm excited to see it.
So do you think the Kings go with the bigger lineup with Murray at the 2, or do you think they try to match the Knicks? Because I'm looking at, this is mostly box score scouting. So someone that's seen the game, I'd rather you tell me. But the last 2 games, they took 40 plus threes each. And that's kind of a similar formula to what the Knicks have been doing, where it's like, we're not generating a ton of offense with isolation anymore. The ability for Randall to just kind of be a battering ram and get to the rim as often as he does. Now we're taking a ton of threes. And if we're hitting them, then we got a great chance to win. But if we're not, then it'll be a close game late. So do you think the Kings try to take advantage of the Knicks small lineup by going big, or do they try to match it by also going small?
I think in terms of the starting lineup, they're going to keep the same lineup. It's going to be Fox, Ellis, Barnes, Keegan, and Sabonis. That's going to be consistent. In terms of after that with the rotation, I think you're going to see more Keegan Murray at the 2.
Okay.
I think at times you're going to see Fox playing off ball. And we're seeing more of that because teams are picking up Fox full court, and for good reason, right? His speed, he wants to get downhill and attack. So they've been playing him more off ball. I don't know that he loves that all the time, but it does make his life a little easier when he doesn't have to come down the floor and have, all of a sudden he is working so hard just to get across the midcourt line. So they're trying some different things there. But yeah, I imagine they're going to play bigger. They like having the look of Sasha, who is a rookie who played in Europe. He was a EuroLeague MVP. They got him over. He's been kind of a disappointment this year. He just came back from injury. He was out since February 9th, but guy's got a quick release from 3. He's very active. He's handsy, makes great passes. So I think they'll play him. They'll play Lyles, Sabonis. Yeah, they'll play big.
I saw the Thunder go to a bigger lineup down the stretch on Sunday night, and it's interesting. This is very clearly the Knicks' best lineup and best chance to win. They also, maybe I want to get your thoughts on this, just how the state of the Knicks from your perspective. Like, they have this 5-man unit that is, their net rating is insane in what is an amount of possessions that's just continuing to grow. Just take one of them off the floor. And like the Precious Achiuwa minutes at the 5, they've survived. But put a former Piston with this crew, and it just completely drops off. They are losing the non-Brunson minutes, the non-starter minutes, and to an insane level. So, like the Thunder, when they had the chance to go big down the stretch in the fourth quarter, they completely erased a 10-point lead. They, like, Josh Giddey had a triple-double after a very disappointing season where Thunder fans are putting him in trade talks. And it's like, yeah, we have no answer for him because we're playing, a lineup that's super small. So I'll be curious in crunch time what the Kings go to with no Anunoby there. With the Knicks going, I know exactly what the closing 5 is going to be for the Knicks. It's what their starting 5 is. What are your thoughts on the Knicks? And if they don't get back healthy, their chances of advancing in the playoffs this year.
I've liked OG for a long time. The Kings were tied to him, and I feel like he would have been a perfect fit for this group if they were able to land him. The rap on him is simple. It's like he just doesn't stay healthy. And this has been him for a long time in the league. When he's out there, you saw how impactful he was with the Knicks. The Knicks look awesome with him, but he's just not out there enough. And, I just can't count on him being there for playoff time. And so that makes it more challenging. I think the Knicks, the good thing about them is they just play hard. And if you just play hard, you're going to be in games. You're going to be in games. And that's why they'll still compete. Brunson's a dog, dude. Like, that's the thing. The Knicks have dogs everywhere. DiVincenzo, guy's been awesome this year. Sacramento fans saw him for a brief minute when he played here after the deadline. And then you had, and then of course, Josh Hart. I mean, I like their DNA. I like their approach. I like the physicality. To make a deep run, it's just, they need OG. I mean, I even think they could have some success even without Randall. And I like Randall. I think they could win a series without him. But if OG and Randall aren't there, you're just relying on Brunson so much. And I feel like what you just mentioned with the starters, I know you're going to play those guys heavy minutes in the playoffs anyways. It's just, you don't have a lot of margin for error come playoff time.
They're going to play them heavy minutes tomorrow. Like,
you're right.
Like the way Tibbs' rotations have been. Look, go ahead.
No, and I mean, I like them. It's just they're missing that, and that's why they made this swing for OG, right? Because they wanted this guy come playoff time, have a long, physical guy who could defend every position on the floor. That's such a big loss for them.
Listen, we're feeling it. And I was talking to someone yesterday about because they're going to give him a contract this offseason. There's been some Knicks fans that are like, well, his absence should determine what his next contract is. And it's just not how it works. They made the trade knowing what they're getting themselves into, and you don't trade quickly and Barrett and, kind of go all in for OG without understanding he's going to miss time in certain games. And if he's a 50-game player, can you go 16-16 in those games? You just have to know that you have to go through a 32-game stretch every year where he's going to miss that, and you got to be a 500 team, and it's the Anunoby games that you try to build your record margin. It is that a sustainable model? And I wonder if that's how they approach this offseason, because I don't know. Alec Burks is not going to be back here next year. I think they're going to be in the market, whether it's through the draft, they have 2 picks, or in free agency. The Randall thing has become such an unknown at this point, because the first reporting from Woj is that they avoided the worst case scenario. We'll be back. We'll be reevaluated in 3 weeks, and we're 9 weeks later. And it's clearly he probably should have got surgery on a dislocated shoulder. And
Herter had the same deal, right? I think Kevin Herter has the same deal. So, and he's having surgery. So
you wonder if this is the way I see it going with Randall is you're looking at he's going to give it one try, and if and when he re-injures himself, they're just going to, all right, we're shutting you down, get the surgery. And the OG thing is now tennis elbow. So I've never had it. I know people who have, and it's just like you just got to rest, and you'll be fine when it's
pain tolerance after that, right? Like it could flare up, and that's kind of what he dealt with when he came back, and it's like it flared back up again. So yeah, I mean, and you talk about with OG, it's like if you can accept that he's going to only play 50 games, but you hope that those games missed aren't bleeding into late April and May when you want him to be playing. And that's the key, And so that's what makes it challenging. I mean, I like this group. I could see why Knicks fans have connected with them, right? They just play hard. Hartenstein too. I mean, I remember him in the G League for Rio Grande Valley Vipers, and just seeing his progress over the years. I thought he'd be a great fit for the Kings because of what you were just talking about. Some of the similarities with Sabonis. He's a good passer. He'd be perfect in this Kings offense. So I like the squad, and the stretch for Sacramento is crucial. I'm nervous to see what this week looks like when you've got the Knicks, the Celtics, they've got the Nets in there too, and then Oklahoma City, the final 4 games of this road trip here of the season for them, and they're fighting, and it's unfortunate too, because that's why you don't throw away games you should win, because now you're stressing about it. Now you're stressing about a potential plan.
Yeah. So, I mean, as Deuce just mentioned, Knicks fans, this is stop 1 on their road trip and during a crucial stretch and a crucial part of their season. So I'll give mine first. And my worst case scenario for the Knicks season, as far as like playoff matchups are concerned, it's like, don't lose. Just don't get eliminated by Miami. And honestly, the rest is kind of gravy. I can't lose a second straight year to Miami and I'll be okay. I'm at the point where I will settle now for the 4-5 against Orlando. If I tell you that I think the Knicks could win as is against Orlando, what do you say?
I think they can. Yeah.
Okay.
Or I like Orlando too. They play tough, but this is new to them.
Yeah.
Right. This is their first time And there are lessons to be learned in the first go around. I'm not saying Orlando can't win it, but their offense, the shooting's not always there. We've seen that multiple times this year in games. Defensively, they play tough. I love Jalen Suggs. I love players like him. I'm not sure they're completely ready, especially when you talk about some of these players on the Knicks who have been there, like Brunson. You think he's scared of the moment? You think he's scared of going into Orlando and trying to win a game? This guy was, when Luka was out, winning playoff games against the Utah Jazz when no one expected Dallas to win. So I would like that matchup for the Knicks.
I think a lot of Knicks fans are now leaning toward just being the 4-5, and it's not even, they don't need the 4 because a lot of New Yorkers live in Florida, so that would be 7 home games for the Knicks going into that matchup. If I went to you with the best possible Kings matchup, say, let's do 2 scenarios, the 7-8 or first round, like say they get to 6 or 5. So what's your ideal scenario for the first round matchup or play-in matchup for that matter?
Play-in, God, what is the ideal one? I'm nervous about them all. I actually think Phoenix would probably be the best one. They've had some success against Phoenix this year. They also were up 22 points with 8 minutes to go in Phoenix in the fourth quarter and gagged that game away. But I'd like to see this current Kings group go at that team. I'm not convinced on the Suns. There's too much, it's similar to Clippers. It's like your turn, my turn. They don't have depth. They don't have a flow. They've got studs with KD and Booker, Beal too, but I think the Kings could beat that team. So if I were to pick between the Lakers, Warriors, yeah, for sure, I'm going that route. Playoff matchup wise, it's unlikely they would have to deal with this in the first round, but I just don't want to see the Pelicans. I'm worried about the Pelicans going to the play-in. The Kings have just gotten destroyed by the Pelicans. I mean, they've had no answer for Zion. The length gives them fits. Herb Jones out there, Dyson Daniels, Trey Murphy. They throw so much at Fox, and it just hasn't been good. They got absolutely destroyed. These 2 teams play again on April 11th in Sacramento, so I'm eager to see that. I don't want to see Denver, of course. I mean, that doesn't sound fun. The team that I'd be cool with, Oklahoma City. And OKC, I like them. I long-term, very concerned about this group. Very concerned. I mean, what they're building, I like Chet. SGA has been amazing. I just don't think they've got the size up front to deal with what the Kings have. And the Kings have played well against Oklahoma City this year. So I think they're a year away from really exploding, and they've had a great regular season, but they lack a lot of size, and they probably need a little experience in the playoffs.
Yeah, it's weird. The Magic and the Thunder find themselves in the same situation, in my opinion, that this is their first real shot at playoff success or playoff experience. And the Magic are doing it as an overachieving 5 seed that I think every time I've talked to someone that isn't a Magic content creator or reporter or fan, like everyone's like, yeah, give me the Magic first round. And the Thunder, it's like, oh, they might be the 1 seed. Like, I have no idea how to say this 1 seed isn't ready. But I'm also like, yeah, this 1 seed may be susceptible in a 1-8 against the Warriors or the Lakers or even the Kings or just a team that's been there before.
It's also because 1-8s aren't what they used to be in the West, right? Like it's not that dramatic. I mean, there's so much talent in this League One, but the West is just stacked. It's crazy. And OKC, I think there are so many people quick to want to put them into that championship picture. I just don't see that they've got it. Like I understand the shooting, and when they're knocking down shots, it looks amazing. Chet, I think long term is going to be a really, really good player in this game. But it's okay if they get bounced in the first round. Like I don't think that's a letdown for them. Their fans might feel that way. They've maybe gotten wrapped up into this whole like, hey, we have a chance to win a championship thing. Maybe I'm wrong on this, but I just think they're going to struggle against Jokic. They're going to struggle against Sabonis. Teams with size, I just don't like them.
You talk about the nightmare scenario, and I assume I'm about to ask you your Mount Rushmore of Kings rivals, but I was talking to someone obviously that covers the Thunder on Saturday for that game, and just don't give us the Lakers first round, because they just haven't played well against that team all season. And, getting eliminated by the Lakers again, when that's a thing that's happened to the Thunder in the past, is just not something they want to go through. This is a great transition. I ask every guest this before I let them leave. The Mount Rushmore of rivals. So we take our rivalries very seriously in New York. I spent most of my night arguing with Heat fans about how dirty Bam Adebayo was last night. A great player, future Hall of Famer, All-Star, should get all NBA consideration, all Defensive Player of the Year, all of that. He also has never been set on a screen that he's set in his career. In your opinion, the Kings Mount Rushmore of rivals, the 4 teams that Kings fans get up for anytime they come up on the schedule.
The Lakers. I mean, it's 2002 lives with me to this day. I mean,
can I ask you? Yeah. So I've never actually deep dove this with someone that can give me a recount of 2002. Did you in the moment watching Game 6? Was it something's off here, or was it after the game or the weeks after that you're we really got jobbed here?
Just to be clear, I was 13 at the time, but I was very wrapped up in this series.
Same.
Yeah. I mean, yes, it was what is happening? You felt like you were getting screwed for sure. And then the weeks go on, you hear more and more people, and it's people outside Sacramento talking about national media. What? But, I also always reference this. Look, this is me recapping this all the time. Go back to Game 4. The Kings are up huge in the game. Samaki Walker hits a half court heave before the half that shouldn't have counted. The next year they changed the rules so you could see, you could actually see the red around the backboard to
the backlit.
Yeah. And but whatever. The Kings were up big in that game. They win Game 4. They go on to win the series. That ends up being the Robert Horry shot. Game 5, Mike Bibby hits a game winner. Awesome. Game 6, you get screwed. Okay. You had a Game 7 at home. That game went to overtime. The Kings missed so many free throws in that game. It was for a good free throw shooting team, they gagged. So it's yes, Game 6, you got screwed. But there was a Game 7. And the Game 7, you weren't good enough. And so to this day, it pains me. The more pain I feel, and the Lakers are on there. Believe it or not, for me, the Dallas Mavericks are on there. I think going back to those times too, in the early 2000s, the Kings smacked them around many times in the playoffs. The Kings' best chance, I think, the best team they had was 2003. They were playing the Mavericks, second round. Weber goes down in Game 2, and he was never the same. That was the end of that Kings team as we knew it. Weber was never the same after that, and they had good teams that are competitive, but they were never a championship contender again after that moment. And the Kings still went to Game 7 without Weber. But those Mavs fans just irritated me. I think even the Luka thing still bugs me, even though that's not their fault at all. But he comes to town the other night, smacks the Kings around a couple of games in a row. He's taunting everyone, telling, hey, they should have drafted me. That brings me pain. And the next one now is the Warriors. I think that's a relatively new one. 90 miles away, very close by. So there's that regional rivalry with it. But it's also after last year, there were emotions, right? The whole Draymond stomping on Sabonis and just the physicality, the back and forth, the fans going at it. There's some hostility. The fourth one, it's really tough. I was thinking about this. The only thing I can come up with is the national media. I think the Kings fans have rivalry with the national media because they constantly feel disrespected and overlooked for years and years and years.
That is amazing that the media gets out of mouth. That's a first.
There's not another team. I can't think of another team that there's that. Hey, I think there's just for Sabonis. Is he a flawed player? Yes. How Domantas Sabonis was not on the All-Star team is criminal. I felt the same way about Brunson last year too. I'm how did Brunson not make the team? Are we watching the Knicks or no? Sabonis, what he is doing this year? The double streak that continues, the triple doubles. He was an all NBA guy last year. He's only gotten better this year. And it's people just want to knock him down. People want to knock him down because he doesn't have the longest arm. So he's not blocking shots all the time. But I admire him. And I think Knicks fans would admire him if he was in New York because he plays hard all the time. I respect that. I respect that about him.
I think for whatever it's worth, there's a Knicks podcaster in New York that had Sabonis on his All-Star ballot on our Patreon. So I know it didn't count, but I was also kind of surprised that the West was. I'm sure you understood this. The West was stacked this year to where
when the Lakers are in the play-in spot and the Kings are like 6 at the time, I believe, top 6 or top 5.
Yeah.
Hey, Lakers, you don't get 2 All-Stars this year.
And I know that was a fascinating debate. Yeah.
Karl Anthony Towns? I'm sorry. The second All-Star in Minnesota, if anyone, would have been Gobert. Like, what are we doing here? So Sabonis was completely overlooked. And hey, that's not even a media thing, really, right? Like,
it's the
coaches decided that, which was shocking to me. But
yeah, so we did a Patreon pod where we drafted the best, 2 teams with only players that didn't make the All-Star team. If it's any comfort, he went second or third. I forget who was first, but I think Wemby might have been first in that draft. But I'm the 02, and you mentioned the 03 playoff series against Dallas. I was 15 at the time, and I don't want to say I remembered in the moment thinking that this was devastating to the point where a run was ending, because then the next game, I believe, is the double overtime game where Nick Van Exel had 40 plus points. I don't bring up bad memories for you.
Van Exel killed the Kings in that series. And again, that's where I go. That's how good that Kings team was, that they lost their best player in game 2. And they still went to game 7. It's crazy. And so, you play the what if game all the time with that, because you're just like, if he doesn't go down, what's that look like? It's crazy when you start getting wrapped up into the what if game. Like, God, what if they won in 02 and then whoever doesn't go down in 03? It's one of the greatest what ifs to me in NBA history. I always say that Kings team, one of the best teams ever not to win it all. And it's kind of a shame.
Yeah, obviously the Knicks will not have had the same regular season success, and it's a different kind of what if, because who knows what happened next year. But I think this is becoming a what if season for Knicks fans, because what if Julius doesn't get hurt against the Miami Heat again? What if OG Anunoby doesn't need surgery and then is hampered by injuries the rest of the season? And if it's any consolation to your Mavs rivalry, we laugh at them all the time every time Jalen Brunson has a good game. Ooh. So we're able to take solace in that. I know Kyrie has done his thing in Dallas this year, and they've somewhat found a replacement. But imagine having Brunson and all the assets you would have had, not having to trade for Kyrie.
Yeah,
where they'd be building around Luka then.
And they're playing. They lost last night against the Warriors, but those moves, I wasn't hot. I knew those moves for PJ Washington and Gafford would help them. Mm-hmm. I just felt like they gave up. They have just kind of gone all in. They don't have a ton of draft picks to move going for. It's not like they have a ton of cap space. I don't think they're good enough to win a championship. But then I watch them like, God, if Luka and Kyrie are locked in and they have those defenders and those other guys can just knock down some threes, it's open. I don't know, man. It could happen for them.
They're going to need some injury luck, I'm sure.
Yeah.
The tough part is, like you said, they've went all in. The Knicks have their pick this year too. So it's top 10 protected. It's probably going to convert this year. So the Porzingis trade will officially be finalized.
Wow.
I think they've gone all in on this team, to your point, and the ways to get better are not many. And they top out at the 3rd or 4th best team. To go all in to be the 3rd or 4th best team is it's tough to see, the next move that takes you to that next stop where you're contenders with it's why the Oklahoma City projections are all fair. This is a team that's ahead of schedule. They're fighting out for the 1 seed with the Nuggets, and, still have getting better to do, so we'll see. Deuce, you've been great with your time. Thank you so much for joining me for this edition of the Knicks Film School pregame show. Any final thoughts, plugs before you get out of here?
If you guys want to check out the podcast, look, we're in Sacramento. We like the Kings. I can tell you, if you listen to our podcast, we're not going to dump on the Knicks. We don't dump on teams. We love the game of basketball. We watch it all the time. We respect. So you're not going to come and hear a whole bunch of hot takes on our show, but we have a lot of fun.
Listen,
and I appreciate you having me.
The Kings are kindred brothers on the other side, because one of our Mount Rushmore at this point might be like, if I have to see one more segment about is Jalen Brunson a 1A or an option one on a team, or how about just how good he is while not being a 1A? How's that? He's fourth in scoring. He's averaging more points a game than Kevin Durant. Like, have that segment, guys.
Oh, but we have to have tiers. We have to have who's better.
Right. Yeah. We have to put him on an MVP ladder, but he's not on the top 10 of the ladder. But maybe he's on the 7th rung of the ladder.
Well, the bonus has been top 5 MVP ladder, but can't make an all-star team.
Right. Yeah. So
we're all disrespected.
Exactly.
No, but seriously, thanks for having me, and I can't wait for the game. It's going to be a fun game Thursday. TNT for Sacramento. That's a big deal. A TNT game. I know you guys are used to being on national TV. Sacramento, we don't get a ton, so it's always a big game. It's special playing in New York too, so it'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah, a lot of fun, and obviously for both of our sakes, we both hope our team comes away with the win because it's getting dire at the end of the season. Thank you, Deuce, for joining me, and thank you, everybody, for tuning in for another edition of the Knicks Film School pregame show. Please, if you like this episode, please leave a 5-star rating and a review. If you're watching, like this video, remember to subscribe. I'll be back tomorrow with a preview of the Chicago Bulls, but until next time, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Enjoy the game tonight, and I will speak with you soon. Peace.